After getting dumped by her boyfriend, a romance novelist crosses paths with a prince from a large kingdom. Following a brief encounter in New York, the two reunite on a beautiful paradise island where she goes in an attempt to overcome writer's block and heartbreak. Will this story have a happy ending? Let's be real, aren't these cute romantic comedies just perfect for certain moments in our lives? And A Royal in Paradise from 2023 brings that super chill vibe with situations everyone can relate to. After all, who hasn't been dumped and gone a bit crazy, trying to get over the heartache? In the case of Olivia Perkins, our protagonist, her solution was to escape to an incredible island, hoping to get over her breakup and find inspiration for her new book. Little did she know, she would encounter a prince who would completely change her life. Right off the bat, we see that Olivia is a famous and successful writer. She's at a book signing for her latest release when her boyfriend Kyle shows up. She excitedly tells him that she's confirmed their vacation to an island that's like paradise on Earth, but things take a turn for the worse because he's there to break up with her. Olivia feels the blow, and a month later she's way behind on finishing her newest book. Then, in an online meeting with her publisher, the writer is pressured to finish the darn thing in 10 days. With little choice, she accepts the deadline. After that, we follow a guy reading Olivia's book, but this isn't just any guy. He's a prince named Alexander from a kingdom called Trovia. He's a huge fan of her work, and uses it as an escape from his royal routine, filled with speeches, meetings, and the like. Indeed, Alexander is feeling pretty fed up with it all. But then his personal assistant Winston arrives and hands him a jam-packed schedule with various commitments. After so many boring tasks, the prince gets excited when Winston gives him a letter from a place called Haven Islands. Yes, that's the same island Olivia was supposed to go to with her boyfriend before the breakup. Alexander opens the letter and sees that it's an invitation to a charity event happening there. He wants to go, but the date clashes with a royal ball that his mother, Queen Patricia, wants him to attend. This is because she wants her son to meet Catherine, the princess from another kingdom, for a possible diplomatic marriage. But he's not keen on the idea and quickly says he's not going to the ball because he can't miss the charity event on Haven Islands. Now we're back in the world of commoners in New York, where Olivia is freaking out, trying to find inspiration to write a book in record time. She's at a library, grabbing several books when she suddenly sees her latest release on the shelf. The writer walks over there and accidentally bumps into Alexander, who happens to be strolling by. He apologizes, but when he looks at her face, he realizes he knows Olivia from somewhere. But she doesn't remember him and takes off. The guy looks at the back of her book and sees that he was talking to the writer he admires so much. He tries to catch up with her on the street, but Olivia has already disappeared into the crowd. Back at her apartment, Olivia is wallowing in heartbreak and a creative crisis. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and when she opens it, she sees her friend Katie, who's there to cheer her up with wine and Chinese food. As they discuss Olivia's situation, Katie notices a brochure for Haven Islands and asks Olivia about it. The writer explains that it's where she was supposed to go on vacation with her ex-boyfriend. Then Katie suggests that they both go there so Olivia can try to get over her heartbreak and creative block. Olivia agrees, and the two of them head to the Paradise Island. As soon as they arrive, Katie heads straight for the pool and Olivia tries to write, but she's uninspired. So she decides to take a walk, and suddenly she sees her ex Kyle with a new girlfriend. Olivia hides behind some bushes, watching them from afar. But then a guy appears behind her asking if everything is okay. It's Prince Alexander. He introduces himself and she responds that she was just chilling there looking at the plants. Then he apologizes for not recognizing her as the writer he admires so much from the bookstore and asks if she's looking for inspiration for her next book. Before she can respond, Kyle arrives with his girlfriend Tiffany, recognizing Olivia and saying hello to her. He explains that he met Tiffany about 3 months ago at a work meeting and that they were there on vacation. But Olivia gets angry because when they were together, he never wanted to go on vacation with her, and by her calculations, they were still together 3 months ago, so Olivia was cheated on. Olivia finds Katie at the pool and shares the gossip with her friend, but her friend becomes more interested in the fact that she talked to Alexander. Meanwhile, the prince visits the island's marine laboratory, the main reason for the charity event. At that moment, Winston arrives and says that the person in charge won't be there for the occasion. So, not to drop the ball, Alexander says he'll take the guy's place, even though he doesn't like the idea of having to give a speech. The next day, Alexander and Winston are walking around the island in the morning when they come across Olivia and Katie. The writer asks more about them, but Alexander lies and says they are consultants for the island's Marine Reserve Fund because he doesn't want his prince identity to leak. Then Alexander invites Olivia and Katie to join him and Winston for a tour of the island. At first, Olivia is hesitant, but she eventually agrees with a little help from her friend. The prince leaves happily while someone watches him from afar. It's a guy named Ridley who is kind of Queen Patricia's right-hand man. He calls her and tells her not to worry about her son. When Olivia and Katie arrive for the tour, Prince Alexander says they'll go kayaking on the beach. Alexander and Olivia end up falling behind as he tries to teach her how to paddle, but the rider can't manage it and falls into the sea. To cover her embarrassment, she also pushes him into the water, and they both laugh it off. The tour ends, and the four of them are walking when they suddenly come across Kyle and Tiffany playing volleyball. Tiffany invites them to join in, while Kyle says there's no point because Olivia never liked sports. But she gets annoyed and decides to play doubles with Alexander, and they do really well, beating Kyle and Tiffany and showing great chemistry, so much so that her ex gets jealous and leaves. After the game, Alexander and Olivia take a stroll on the beach and chat, but they're being watched by Ridley. So he calls Queen Patricia and informs her that her son seems to be getting involved with a commoner, which ticks her off. She asks Ridley to investigate everything he can about Olivia. Back to the conversation between the two, Alexander tells Olivia that he's always been into marine life and social causes just like his late father. But his mother doesn't want him to pursue that. For him, that island means a lot. Meanwhile, Olivia talks about the difficulty she's having finishing her new book. She admits that, in the romances she's written so far, it was easier to invent happy endings. The prince praises her creativity and says that her fans like him wouldn't mind waiting longer to read her new book. After the conversation, he invites her to visit the island's marine reserve, and she accepts. Later, Katie returns from a walk on the island and finds Olivia finally writing. She seems to have found the idea she needed. As they talk, Ridley knocks on the door disguised as one of the hotel's staff. He offers champagne and asks for their names. Then he leaves to inform Patricia about Olivia. The queen searches her name on the internet and sees that she's a writer but doesn't have royal blood, so she instructs Ridley to separate the two. The next morning, Olivia and Alexander meet, and he tells her that he really enjoyed her company. The prince is finally going to confess his true identity when Ridley shows up and hands Alexander a phone, saying his mother is on the line. He ignores the guy and finally tells Olivia who he is, but the writer is upset because Alexander lied to her in the beginning. Now, things are messed up. But before I continue, guys, leave your like here. And if you like the video, share it with more people so I can keep bringing more great recaps around here, alright? Olivia finds her friend Katie in the room and tells her everything that happened. She's pretty angry, but Katie brings another perspective to her friend, saying that maybe he lied because he wanted to create a real connection with her and didn't want his identity to get in the way. As they talk, Alexander arrives in the room and apologizes for lying, saying he won't do it again. She eventually accepts and the two go out to grab a bite together. Ridley is heading back to the kingdom of Trovia. Patricia calls him and asks if her son is really falling for a commoner. Ridley says he's never seen the prince as happy in his life as he is now, which worries the queen. Then the guy starts talking about love, but stops abruptly. Patricia makes a revealing expression, showing that maybe they're into each other. After the meal, Olivia and Alexander are heading to the Marine Reserve. He tells her that he's having trouble thinking about the speech for the charity event because he can't talk about his feelings. At the reserve, the two dive together, strengthening their connection even more, and she offers to help him with the speech. Continuing their outing, Alexander takes Olivia to a waterfall on the island that hardly anyone knows about. He tells her that he used to go there with his father, who was an environmentalist. Alexander admires him a lot and wishes he could be more like him. Olivia asks him why he doesn't do that, and he replies that Queen Patricia insists that he focus on his real life and his prince routine. So Olivia gives him a smart motivation, telling him to focus on his dreams. As they're returning from the waterfall, they see Kyle and Tiffany having a heated argument. Tiffany storms off, and just then, Alexander receives a phone call and has to step away to answer it. Kyle tells Olivia that he regrets breaking up with her, but when he tries to hug her, she refuses, making him feel awkward, and he leaves. Finally, it's the night of the charity event at the island's marine reserve. Alexander is quite nervous about the speech, and because he'll be returning to Trovia the next day. He wants to confess his feelings to Olivia, and is nervous about that too. Olivia shows up with Katie, and she looks simply stunning, making the prince even more smitten. He announces the start of the event on the microphone, and everyone applauds. After dinner, a dance begins, and Alexander asks Olivia to dance. He asks her for a spoiler of her new novel, and she says it's about a common girl finding love on a paradise island. She thanks him for showing her the island and helping with her writer's block. They're about to kiss, but Queen Patricia arrives just in time. She introduces herself to Olivia and asks the two to join her and Ridley for dinner. But Olivia notices something going on between them and mentions it to Alexander. When they sit down, Patricia is somewhat rude and sarcastic to the writer, implying that her books are shallow. As tension builds during dinner, Ridley informs Alexander that he needs to take some official photos. Alexander doesn't want to go, but he has no choice. When Patricia is alone with Olivia at the table, she asks the writer if she's in love with her son. Since Olivia doesn't respond, Patricia realizes she is. This gets the Queen upset because she tells Olivia that commoners don't belong in royalty, suggesting that it's best for the two to stay away from each other to avoid problems. Olivia leaves the party crying, and on her way, she encounters Kyle. He tries to reconcile with her at all costs, saying that the prince doesn't deserve her and that he regrets breaking up. But Olivia isn't interested and turns him down. Olivia returns to the room, talks to her friend, and they both leave the island. But before they leave, Katie sends a message to Winston, explaining what happened. The next morning, Alexander goes to her room to find out what happened, but sees that it's empty. Then Winston arrives and shows him the message, which makes the prince furious with his mother. He quickly goes to confront Queen Patricia. Alexander goes to Queen Patricia's suite, where she is with Ridley, and confronts her. His mother tells him not to be dramatic, and not to pursue someone common because the royal heritage must be preserved. The prince accuses his mother of always putting her duties ahead of her happiness, implying that he knows about her and Ridley. Patricia feels embarrassed and admits that she and Ridley have grown close since her husband passed away. But she can't be with someone who's not royalty because it would be a scandal. Then Alexander takes his mother's hand and asks her to choose to be happy instead of dedicating her life solely to royalty. Back in New York, we see Olivia in her apartment, writing and finally finishing the draft of her book. But after the editor receives the content, she's a bit hesitant because the ending is sad and the characters don't end up together. So, Olivia responds to her that she won't always be able to write happy endings. While they're talking, someone knocks on Olivia's door. When she opens it, she's face to face with Prince Alexander along with Winston and her friend Katie. He says he loves her and won't give up their happiness because of his royal status. Shortly after, Queen Patricia enters the apartment accompanied by Ridley. She then thanks Olivia for showing that happiness is more important than outdated ideas of royalty. She tells them to be very happy before heading out to a date with Ridley. Then the two kiss, and the movie ends with the editor who saw everything online asking for a happy ending for Olivia's book. Well, folks, isn't this type of movie just relaxing? A Royal in Paradise is part of a wave of popular comedy films that are booming on platforms like Netflix. As a curiosity, it did quite well for a story that was filmed in just 12 days in Queensland, Australia. It also has an alternate version with 5 minutes more, where director Adrian Powers further develops Olivia's romance with Alexander. On IMDb, it has a rating of 8 out of 10, with several comments praising the cast and the simple yet engaging story. And A Royal in Paradise definitely has a lot of cool stuff going on in that regard. It's worth checking out. Well, that was my analysis of the movie. We're in this together. Hugs from Henrique. Mission accomplished. Over and out.